July 1980. Moscow. Very soon the Summer Olympic Games will begin, an event not only of national but also of global significance. And preparations are in full swing in the capital. On one ordinary July day, two passengers, Tatiana Kolesnikova and Marina Lopatkina, boarded the Kharkov-Moscow train. The carriage was empty, except for the two female conductors, but this surprised no one. During the Olympics, people from other cities could only enter the capital with special passes. Trains often ran half empty in those days. Just before departure, a stocky man with slightly bulging eyes jumped into the carriage. He didn't have a ticket, but he was ready to pay on the spot to get to Moscow. The conductors, in need of money, exchanged glances and let the passenger in. The doors closed as the train started moving. The train arrived at Kursky station on schedule, but for some reason the carriage doors didn't open. Without thinking much, someone standing on the platform pulled the handle. The very first passengers who entered the carriage rushed back to the platform when a terrifying scene appeared before them. The walls, floor and seats of the carriage were covered in blood. On the doors, windows and compartment mirrors, handprints could be seen. There had clearly been a fight here. Clearly someone had fought for their life, but there wasn't a single body in the carriage. The investigators who arrived began to examine the crime scene, not yet knowing that they were already on the trail. One of the most brutal criminals of his time, Anatoly Nagiev, nicknamed the Mad Maniac, who was hunting Alla Pugacheva. Anatoly Nagiev was born in 1958 in Angarsk. When the boy was 5 years old, his parents moved to the Kursk region, where they settled near the town of Sudzha. Soon, little Tolya's father and mother divorced, and from then on the boy was raised by his mother. Anatoly had a passion for wandering since childhood and aspired to be a circus acrobat. He was an active sportsman with a special love for gymnastics. The future maniac had quite a difficult character. Anatoly was hot-tempered, often got into fights with his peers, and preferred to solve all problems with brute force. Due to his short stature of 165 centimeters and other factors, Nagiev was unlucky with girls. He spoke quite well and looked good, but he lost his temper extremely quickly. Girls unconsciously sensed a threat in the dark-haired athlete. Nagiev developed sexual desire early, and it was extremely strong. Realizing that words would get him nowhere, Anatoly decided to act in the way he knew best, with force. Especially since all the girls around him were probably already sexually active, and there were no virgins among them. Nagiev saw nothing criminal in forcing a girl to have sex. He believed that a woman is just a body, and a real man takes that body and subdues it without asking, and if she doesn't like it, then it's her own fault. Anatoly Nagiev committed his first assault when he was 17. At that time, the victim, fearing public condemnation and perhaps also under Nagiev's threats, did not go to the police and told no one about what had happened. The second incident also went unpunished for the young man. The girl was more concerned about what people would say, so she didn't go to the police. And only the third victim, who according to some sources was Nagiev's classmate, decided to go to the authorities. In 1975, Nagiev was convicted and sent to prison for 6 years. Those who end up in prison for sexual crimes are usually doomed to become outcasts among inmates, occupying the lowest rung of the prison hierarchy. Nagiev would have faced the same fate, but his athletic background wasn't for nothing. Time and again, he fought off the inmates who came after him, throwing them into the corners one after another. Strength combined with aggression made Nagiev fight to the end, and his insatiable thirst for blood shocked even the most seasoned inmates. It was in prison that he got his nickname Madman. Partly it was given to him because of his eye. When Nagiev lost his temper, his eyes would fill with blood and their appearance would terrify everyone. It's quite possible that it was in prison where the criminal's pathological attraction to Alla Pugacheva began. Songs by Pugacheva, who was already very popular at that time, were often played on the prison radio, and Nagiev soon learned them by heart. As he later told investigators, soon the singer's voice began to sound in his head even at night. After the first difficult months, Nagiev successfully adapted to prison and earned respect not only among the other inmates, but also among the administration. Thanks to this, in January 1979, for good behavior, Anatoly's sentence was eased and he was sent to a settlement colony in the village of Chikshina, Pechora district. There, Nagiev started working in logging, and most importantly, he gained the ability to move around almost freely. Soon he returned to his criminal hobby. On January 30, 1979, at the station square in the city of Pechora, Nagiev met Olga Demyanenko. Nagiev made a good impression on the woman, and after a short conversation she invited him to her place to sit and have some wine. Then we'll see how it goes. According to another version, Nagiev himself managed to persuade the woman to invite him over, supposedly to help her look for her missing son. Regardless of who took the initiative, the couple soon ended up at Olga's place. Nagiev could have finally gotten what he wanted without violence, but he didn't want to. He attacked the woman and inflicted about 30 wounds, stabbing her in the stomach and chest. When Demyanenko stopped moving, Nagiev felt a surge of intense desire. He had anal intercourse with the dead woman and left the apartment. The body of Olga Demyanenko was discovered only 3 days after the crime. The investigation had not a single lead and it was conducted rather carelessly. It would only be discovered that Anatoly Nagiev committed this crime after he confessed to it. As for Nagiev himself, for a couple of weeks after what happened, he couldn't sleep peacefully and kept tossing and turning on his camp bed. It seemed to him that any moment the door would open and the police officers would come for him, but time passed and no one came. For some reason, the police didn't even think to check the prisoners. After 3 months, Nagiev was certain he had evaded responsibility, so he decided to repeat the crime. May 28, 1979. Anatoly Nagiev was traveling on the Ukhta Pechora train. By the end of the route, the carriage was almost empty, but the criminal's attention was drawn to a woman named Daria. According to other sources, Tatyana Kravchenko was a young and attractive woman traveling to Pechora on a business trip. After a brief conversation, Nagiev decided that he could try the same trick with his new victim as he did with Demyanenko. He bluntly offered the woman sexual relations. With just under half an hour until the train stopped, Nagiev assured her it would suffice. But Kravchenko, offended by such a crude proposal, sharply refused. Then Nagiev pulled out a knife and stabbed the woman in the chest twice, then tore off her silk scarf and threw it around her neck. He tightened it until Kravchenko stopped breathing. After having sexual intercourse with the already dead body, Nagiev hid it in the luggage compartment under the seat and moved to the next carriage. There, the criminal got off the train. After Kravchenko's body was discovered, the investigators had a lead in the form of semen. Moreover, the criminal, just like in the Demyanenko case, used a knife to cause death. But DNA analysis was not used at that time, and besides, the cases were not even linked to each other. The conductor kept quiet about the ticketless passenger on the train. Fare evasion threatened him with dismissal, so the conductor decided that his own career was more important than catching the criminal. The items taken from the victim's body were sold by Nagiev in November 1979. Anatoly Nagiev was granted parole for good behavior. Thus, instead of 6 years, he served only 4.5 years in prison, and during that time he managed to commit 2 more crimes. Nagiev returned to his native Kursk region, where he got a job as a projectionist for a mobile cinema unit. The job involved a lot of traveling, which was convenient for Nagiev. In addition, during his time working in logging, the criminal tried to socialize and learn to control his anger to some extent. Nagiev began introducing himself to his victims as a forestry worker, engineer, or technologist. People often believed him and paid a heavy price for it. Between November 1979 and September 1980, Anatoly Nagiev committed around 30 attacks on women with the intent to rob and assault them. As the maniac traveled the region with a movie camera, his obsession with Alla and Pugacheva intensified. In his apartment, dozens of her photographs stood and hung on the wall, like a real iconostasis. As investigators would later note, but the photo of Nagiev was not enough for him. He wanted to see Pugacheva, to grab her and do to her everything he had done to his other victims. In March of '79, the film The Woman Who Sings was released, in which Pugacheva played the main role, as herself. Nagiev watched the film and decided, I'll go to Moscow and see her with my own eyes. The criminal came to Pugacheva's concert and tried to get into her dressing room with flowers. According to one version, that's how Nagiev found out where the future prima donna of Russian pop music lived. Supposedly, she mistook him for a fan and gave him her home address and even her phone number. As for Alla Pugacheva Nagieva herself, if she did see him, she doesn't remember it. Many fans approached her after concerts. Some really tried to break into the dressing room, and some even sent threatening letters after failing. Nagiev wrote no letters. Words didn't interest him. He preferred action. He was devising a plan to abduct Pugacheva. According to some reports, one day the criminal even followed the singer to her house and entered the building, but he was stopped by the concierge. The woman asked who the uninvited guest was visiting, and Nagiev supposedly got scared and ran away. However, this version doesn't really fit with Bashini's character. It's unlikely that a simple question would stop such an aggressive and strong man. On July 4th, 1980, Anatoly Nagiev boarded a half-empty train car on the Kharkov-Moscow route. There were only 2 female passengers and 2 conductors in it, and Nagiev killed all 4 of them and then committed a sexual act with their bodies. The criminal threw the women's bodies out the window while the train was moving in the area of the city of Oriol between the Stalnoy Kony and Stanovoy Kolodets stations for almost 30 kilometers. This couldn't help to cover up the traces of the crime, so most likely Nagiev acted instinctively. According to Nagiev himself, he didn't plan any crimes that day. He just wanted to get to Moscow. Maybe to see Pugacheva again, and if he was lucky, to kidnap her or force her into sexual intercourse. He didn't buy a ticket because he understood that no one would just let a former convict like him into Moscow. But the train attendants wouldn't refuse money. Who would miss a chance to earn extra cash? But one of the train attendants looked a lot like Pugacheva. Nagiev's blood boiled in his veins and lust rushed to his head. He visited the attendants' compartment, engaged them in conversation, and directly suggested to the one resembling Pugacheva that they get intimate. Nagiev wasn't embarrassed at all that her partner was sitting nearby. When the woman refused, he pulled out a knife and stabbed her in the chest with full force. The second conductor could have exposed Nagiev, so he killed her after the first one. After that, the criminal decided to walk through the carriage and get rid of any other possible witnesses. Someone might have heard the noise. The criminal didn't want to jump out of the train while it was moving at full speed. Maria Lopatkina and Tatiana Kolesnikova sat in their compartment, discussing life peacefully. They hadn't heard or known anything about what had happened, but that didn't help them. Nagiev stabbed them one after another, splattering blood everywhere. The bodies were also thrown out the window. Opening another compartment, the criminal unexpectedly ran into a man, the train's electrician, Alexander Preludsky, who had come to the empty car to rest. Nagiev suddenly felt as if he had been doused with cold water. All his anger and fervor disappeared. "You don't have to be afraid. I won't touch you. I'm only interested in women," he told the stunned electrician, then turned around and left. Scared to death, Preludsky locked the compartment door and spent the rest of the night there without closing his eyes. Later, he told the investigators that he didn't believe the criminal and spent the whole night expecting him to come back and finish him off. Just like last time, Anatoly Nagiev calmly left the train after committing the crime, and Alexander Preludsky was immediately made the main suspect in the mass murder of 4 women. Wanting to solve the high-profile case as quickly as possible, the investigators even tried to fake evidence by smearing Preludsky's shoes with blood. Realizing that he was facing prison time or even the death penalty, Preludsky confessed right away. Besides him, others had also seen the fare dodger. As it turned out, there had long been a well-established scheme for transporting fare dodgers on the railway. The conductors would give part of their earnings to the management, represented by the train foreman, and he would turn a blind eye to the fare dodgers, and even distribute them among the cars if the train was full. Preludsky claimed that the conductors themselves let the fare dodger in. They questioned the foreman, and he confirmed his subordinate's words, although during the first interrogation he hadn't even mentioned any fare dodger. It became clear that there really was an outsider in the car. Preludsky was reluctantly released. After interviewing the relatives and colleagues of the victims, the investigators made a list of the items that the criminal had taken from the robbed women. It was clear that he would definitely try to sell the jewelry, so descriptions of the jewelry were sent to pawn shops and jewelry workshops in nearby cities. The husband of one of the victims reported that his wife wore a gold ring made at the Yerevan jewelry factory. These rings had special and unique numbers. It was a good chance to catch the criminal, and they took advantage of it. Sometime later, the Kursk Region Police Department received a message that everyone had been waiting for. A young guy brought that very ring to one of the jewelry stores in Kursk and tried to sell it to the owner of the store. Realizing that he was probably facing a criminal wanted throughout the entire Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, the store owner said he was busy with urgent matters and asked him to come back a little later, in half an hour. The police were already waiting when he returned. The young man's name was Grigory Dugin, and he was immediately detained and brought to the head of the police department. The detainee didn't stay silent. He confessed everything honestly. It turned out that Dugin lives in Lvov, and the ring for sale was left with him by his friend Anatoly Nagiev, who is currently in Dnepropetrovsk with his acquaintance. According to another account, Nagiev gifted this ring to Dugin, who chose to wear it on his finger. The ring turned out to be too tight and got stuck. His finger swelled up, and that's when Dugin ran to the first jeweler he could find for help. With the Olympics approaching, finding the criminal was a pressing matter. They couldn't allow a person who had brutally taken the lives of 4 women to walk free. The search for Nagiev involved police forces from all over the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics. The operation was personally overseen by Nikolai Shchelikov, the Minister of Internal Affairs of the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics at that time. The KGB was also brought into the case. It turned out that Nagiev's uncle had left for the Middle East back in the 1920s and then moved to Iran. Some witnesses recalled that shortly before the incident on the Kharkov-Moscow train, Nagiev had been asking about his uncle's address and was talking about the possibility of moving to him. The KGB was supposed to intercept the criminal if he headed toward the border. Urgent searches were conducted at Nagiev's relatives' homes. His sister in Kurchatov was found to have earrings belonging to one of the victims. This confirmed the theory that Nagiev was involved in the crime. In his mother's house, a notebook was found with addresses in various cities and villages of the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, along with the names and surnames of women. The name Alla Pugacheva was also found in it. Next to it, a cross was drawn. Besides Pugacheva, Nagiev was also actively interested in Sofia Rotaru, tracked her trips to Moscow and Crimea, and found out the addresses where the singer lived. In Nagiev's notebook, there were about 310 names and addresses, 310 potential victims of a cruel necrophile criminal. One of the addresses was in Dnepropetrovsk and belonged to that very acquaintance. Soon, Anatoly Nagiev was arrested and transferred to Orel. Now, all he could do was wait for the trial. It seemed that the story of the maniac could be brought to a close, or at least paused, but Nagiev had no intention of obediently sitting in the detention center and waiting for the verdict. At first, he was placed in what is called a press cell, a cell with specially planted inmates whose task was to make Nagiev's life unbearable and thus force him to cooperate with the investigation. However, Besheny knocked out one of their eyes during a fight in another cell. As a result of the fight, he inflicted serious bodily harm on another inmate, and then he tried to escape. During one of the walks around the building, Nagiev noticed an open window without bars. The strong and agile criminal knocked his 2 guards' heads together, broke his handcuffs, and jumped out of the second-floor window. Fortunately, at that time, there were 6 more officers in the yard. Nagiev fell badly, landing on his back and buttocks. While he was coming to his senses, they restrained him and dragged him back to the cell. After that, the Minister of Internal Affairs, Shchelikov, personally called the head of the Kursk Department of Internal Affairs and ordered him to ensure proper security measures for the dangerous criminal. Special handcuffs were made for his leg, which could not be unlocked. Kursk's Internal Affairs head Pankin declared, "Everything has been done, the criminal won't escape," but he was wrong. While Nagiev was in the pre-trial detention center, he was charged with several more crimes. He confessed to some of them. The investigation determined who killed Olga Demyanenko and Tatiana Kravchenko. According to the criminal, he did not choose his victims randomly, but by the scent that supposedly came from them. Nagiev also spoke about his plans to deal with Alla Pugacheva and Sofia Rotaru. But some of the crimes remained unresolved. Nagiev did not take responsibility for them. For some time after his failed escape attempts, he tried to play the role of a mentally ill person. He said he heard voices and claimed to be a messenger of an alien race. But the forensic psychiatric examination gave a clear conclusion. He was sane. In protest, Nagiev stabbed himself in the stomach with a sharpened spoon and was sent to the hospital. After returning, the criminal went straight to the defendant's bench, and here he once again fully lived up to his nickname, the Madman. He cursed, attacked the guards, insulted people and the prosecutor. The case of Anatoly Nagiev consisted of 20 volumes. On July 2nd, 1981, the hunter after Pugacheva was sentenced to the ultimate punishment, death by firing squad. Nagiev received the sentence surprisingly calmly. He already had an escape plan forming in his mind. In August of 1981, Anatoly Nagiev was to be transferred to Novocherkassk prison, where his sentence would be carried out. He understood that this was his chance, his opportunity to be free again. On August 19th, the criminal made his second, and this time successful escape. This escape was largely made possible because the train was delayed, which caused the prisoner transfer procedure to be carried out with numerous violations. Thus, the escort group handing over the prisoners brought several dozen criminals out of the carriage at once, causing them to crowd together on the platform. In addition, even though the officers knew about Nagiev's tendency to escape, his hands were cuffed in front of him, not behind his back. When Anatoly saw the approaching train, he rushed forward and dashed right in front of the locomotive. According to another version, he jumped under the carriage. It was impossible to organize a pursuit immediately because there was a large group of prisoners on the platform and they could not be left unattended. 3 officers chased after Nagiev, but thanks to his good physical condition, the criminal easily managed to escape from the pursuit. The escort later claimed Nagiev had unlocked his handcuffs before escaping, but this was quickly disproven. The escape of a dangerous prisoner sentenced to death was an exceptional event for the entire Union of Soviet Socialist Republics. Nikolai Shchelokov was immediately informed, and the minister gave the order to apprehend him at any cost. The deadline for execution was 3 days. The police, internal troops, and even some army units were put on alert. In the Rostov region, the siren plan was announced. Police cordoned off train stations and plainclothes officers began patrolling commuter trains. In civilian clothes, detectives put up posters with the escaped criminal's photo all over Novocherkassk. Due to Nagiev's extreme danger, the order was given not to take him alive. They hunted him down after putting on bulletproof vests. Alla Pugacheva was also warned about the possible danger. The singer's close circle was shocked that a maniac could be walking around nearby. Pugacheva was frightened. She didn't go near the windows unless necessary, and she didn't leave the house without being accompanied by one of the men. At that time, she was married to Yevgeny Boldin. The singer later said that she lived as if under siege, and even for groceries, either Boldin or a family friend, the songwriter Ilya Reznik, would go. They would also check the entrance when Pugacheva needed to go outside and would escort her to the car. Soon the singer left the country and the tour began. Only abroad did Pugacheva finally breathe easy. Meanwhile, the 3 days allotted to catch Nagiev passed, then another 3 days, then 3 weeks, but the criminal seemed to have vanished into thin air. Human resources were running out, and many suggested calling off the search. And then, on September 29, 1981, a call came into the operations headquarters. One of the volunteers was in the Yanova hamlet, which was located near the city, and he said that a local resident stopped him. The man reported that he noticed smoke coming from a haystack not far from his house. At first he thought it was just boys playing pranks, but when he got closer, he noticed an opening in the haystack. The interior revealed a makeshift dwelling with dishes, food, clothing, and a handcrafted calendar made from roofing felt. The calendar was set to the date of the escape at Nagiev, August 19th. But most importantly, the volunteer told the police that a man with a hunting rifle had recently been seen near the haystack. Right away, the farmsteads were surrounded. They were ordered to check every house, every barn, even to look into the village outhouses. There are 2 further versions of how events unfolded, each with its own supporters. According to one version, at that time there was a wedding taking place in the hamlet. Some tipsy guests stepped outside for a smoke and noticed a stocky gypsy woman walking toward them. Locals had recently been losing clothes and having their cellars raided. The gypsy woman was an outsider. Maybe she's the one stealing. The drunken men called out to the gypsy woman, but she suddenly took off running with surprising agility for a woman and ran straight into a staged ambush at the edge of the village. When Nagiev turned around, aiming his sawed-off shotgun at the approaching people, they opened fire on him. According to another version, Nagiev had a pen pal living in the hamlet and he stayed at her place. He was caught thanks to one of the police ambushes that had been set up, but this time without any disguises. In any case, when he was arrested, Nagiev also started shooting back. As a result, he received 15 gunshot wounds and almost died. already in the Novocherkassk prison hospital. Realizing that there was less and less time left before the sentence would be carried out, Nagiev tried to persuade a nurse to help him escape, but the woman refused. Soon the criminal was transferred to a cell and the chance was lost. Then Nagiev stated that he wanted to confess to new crimes and indicate the places where they were committed. However, the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics' Ministry of Internal Affairs and Prosecutor's Office believed the criminal was again seeking a chance to escape, buying time to plan another getaway. His words were disregarded. On April 5, 1882, they came for Anatoly Nagiev to take him to be executed by firing squad. When he was being led down the corridor, he managed to break free and attack the guard, biting his finger, in some accounts biting off the phalanx of the finger. After that, Nagiev stated that for attacking a prison officer, he should be put on trial. The criminal was clearly hoping for a postponement of the sentence and another escape, but the sentence was carried out that very same day. Anatoly Nagiev was only 24 years old when he was executed. He was buried in a grave with an inventory number, without a name, without a plaque, as is customary for such criminals. The death of the maniac Pugacheva was reported briefly. He will not bother you anymore.